I never believed in divine intervention until the night Marcus Webb said grace and thanked God for bringing me to town. That moment changed everything I thought I knew about faith, love, and the courage it takes to be truly seen. My name is Daniel, and I moved to Millbrook, Tennessee 3 months ago for a job I didn't particularly want, running from a life in Chicago that had grown too loud, too empty, too full of people who knew my name but not my heart. The tech company transferred me to manage their small satellite office, and I'd accepted mostly because I needed distance from everything familiar, from the bars where I'd go looking for connection and leave feeling more alone, from the apartment where silence had become its own kind of noise. Millbrook was the kind of town where people still waved at strangers, where the main street had more churches than stoplights, and where being gay meant keeping your head down and your truth quieter. I knew this when I arrived. I'd done my research, but I told myself it didn't matter because I wasn't looking for romance anyway. I was looking for peace, for reset, for a chance to figure out who I was when I stripped away all the noise. The first month passed in a blur of work and solitude. I'd rent movies on Friday nights, cook elaborate meals for one, and take long drives through the surrounding countryside where the autumn leaves were turning colors I'd forgotten existed. It was lonely, sure, but it was a clean kind of lonely, intentional, safe. Then I met Marcus at the most unlikely place imaginable, the Millbrook Community Garden on a Saturday morning in late October. I'd started volunteering there on weekends, needing something to fill the hours, needing to feel my hands in soil, creating something real. The garden coordinator, an elderly woman named Mrs. Patterson, had welcomed me with the kind of warmth that felt both genuine and cautious, like she was trying to figure me out but wanted to be kind while doing it. Marcus was kneeling in the tomato section when I arrived that morning, his hands working through the soil with a gentleness that caught my attention immediately. He was tall, with dark brown skin that gleamed with sweat in the morning sun, his hair cut close, his frame solid in a way that suggested both strength and restraint. He wore an old college t-shirt, faded and paint-stained, and jeans that had seen better days. What struck me most was his focus, the way he touched each plant like it mattered, like he was having a conversation with something living and deserving of respect. I was assigned to work the same section, and for the first hour we barely spoke. Just the occasional nod, the passing of tools, the comfortable silence of two people sharing space without needing to fill it. But then he asked me to hand him the watering can, and when our fingers brushed during the exchange, something electric passed between us. I saw his breath catch, saw the way his eyes widened just slightly before he looked away. We're both good at hiding, I thought. We've both had practice. By noon, we were talking. Small things at first. He told me he taught high school English, that he'd grown up in Millbrook, that he'd left for college in Nashville, but came back when his mother got sick. That was 5 years ago, and he'd stayed even after she recovered because, as he put it, this town was in his blood whether he liked it or not. I told him about Chicago, about the tech world, about feeling like I'd been living someone else's life. I didn't tell him everything, but I told him enough that he understood I was running from something. He didn't push. He just listened with this intensity that made me feel heard in a way I hadn't experienced in years. When Mrs. Patterson called us in for lunch, Marcus and I sat together on the wooden bench outside the tool shed, eating the sandwiches we'd brought, our shoulders almost touching. The conversation flowed easier now, moving from books to music to the strange experience of feeling like a stranger in your own life. Then he said something that made my heart stop. We were talking about his teaching, and he mentioned a student who'd come out to him last year, how scared the kid had been, how Marcus had tried to create a safe space in his classroom, even though he knew it put a target on his back in this conservative town. The way he said it, the weight behind his words, told me everything I needed to know. He was speaking from experience, from understanding, from his own hidden truth. Our eyes met, and in that moment we both knew. We saw each other completely. Two men carrying the same secret, the same careful distance from our own desires, the same exhaustion from constantly measuring our words and gestures, but neither of us said it out loud. Not then, because knowing and acknowledging are two different kinds of brave, and we weren't there yet. Over the next few weeks, Marcus and I developed a friendship that felt both natural and terrifying. We'd meet at the garden every Saturday, then started getting coffee afterward at the small diner on Main Street. We'd talk for hours about everything and nothing, our conversations weaving through literature and philosophy and the small observations about life that reveal who people really are. He told me about his father, a pastor who'd passed away when Marcus was in college, and the complicated legacy of growing up as a preacher's kid, about the weight of expectations, the performance of righteousness, the way faith could be both a sanctuary and a cage. He spoke about God with this mixture of reverence and wrestling, like he was in a constant negotiation with something bigger than himself. I told him about my own complicated relationship with faith, how I'd grown up Catholic but left the church when I realized it had no room for who I was, how I sometimes missed the ritual, the sense of something sacred, but couldn't reconcile it with the rejection I'd experienced. We never explicitly discussed being gay, but it was there in every conversation, every careful word choice, every moment our eyes held just a second too long. We were dancing around the truth, both terrified of naming it because naming it would require decisions neither of us was ready to make. Then came Thanksgiving week. Marcus invited me to dinner at his mother's house, insisting that nobody should spend the holiday alone. I almost said no, knowing how dangerous it was to get closer, to let myself want something I couldn't have. But the loneliness won out, or maybe it was hope. Maybe it was the part of me that was tired of running. His mother, Diane Webb, welcomed me with open arms and knowing eyes. She was a woman of deep warmth and deeper perception, the kind of person who saw everything but chose her words carefully. The house smelled like cornbread and collard greens and something sweet baking in the oven. Family photos covered every surface, and I noticed that many featured Marcus's father in his pastoral robes, his smile broad and commanding. There were 6 of us at dinner: Diane, Marcus, his older sister Angela, with her husband and 2 kids. They welcomed me like family, asking about my life with genuine interest, making sure I felt included in every conversation and inside joke. But I was hyper-aware of Marcus across the table, the way he laughed with his niece, the way he helped his mother carry dishes, the gentle competence in everything he did. When Diane asked Marcus to say grace, the room fell quiet. Everyone bowed their heads, and I followed suit, feeling like an imposter in this moment of family intimacy. Marcus's voice was soft but steady. He thanked God for the food, for family, for health and blessings. Then he paused, and I felt the weight of that silence. When he spoke again, his voice carried something different, something raw. He said, "And Lord, I thank you for bringing Daniel to our town, for bringing someone who sees the world with kind eyes and an open heart, for the gift of unexpected friendship when I didn't even know I needed it." My throat closed. Tears burned behind my eyes. I couldn't look up, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what I'd just heard. Because in that prayer, in front of his family, in this house filled with his father's memory, Marcus had claimed me, had named what I meant to him in the only way he could, had told me, through God, what he couldn't say directly. When I finally raised my head, his eyes found mine immediately, and in them I saw everything: fear and courage, desire and restraint, a question and an answer all at once. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. I laughed when appropriate, answered questions, helped clear the table. But all I could think about was that prayer, about the risk Marcus had taken, the door he'd opened just a crack. After dinner, Marcus suggested we take a walk. We bundled up against the cold November evening and headed down the quiet street, our breath visible in the air, our hands shoved in our pockets to keep from reaching for each other. We walked in silence for several blocks, the weight of unspoken words growing heavier with each step. Finally, Marcus led us to a small park, empty except for the bare trees and a single streetlight casting long shadows. He stopped at a bench and sat down. I sat beside him close enough that our shoulders touched. The contact sent electricity through my entire body. "I need to tell you something," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "And I'm terrified, but I think you already know." My heart was pounding so hard I thought he must be able to hear it. "I think I do," I managed to say. He turned to face me, and in the dim light, I could see tears in his eyes. "I've spent my whole life trying to be what everyone needed me to be. The good son, the faithful Christian, the respectable teacher, and I've been so careful, Daniel, so careful to never let anyone see the parts of me that don't fit the story they've written." I wanted to reach for his hand, but didn't dare. "I know," I said. "I've been careful too. When you came to town, when I met you at the garden, something shifted. For the first time in my life, I met someone who understood without needing explanation, someone who carried the same weight, the same hiding, and I realized how tired I am, how exhausted from pretending." "Marcus," I started, but he shook his head. "Let me finish, please, because if I don't say this now, I might never have the courage again." He took a shaky breath. "I'm gay, Daniel. I've known since I was 15. I've prayed about it, fought it, tried to change it, tried to make peace with a life of loneliness. And I thought I had. I thought I'd accepted that this was my cross to bear, that faithfulness meant denying this part of myself." The tears were falling now, cutting tracks down his face. "But then you arrived, and suddenly I couldn't accept it anymore, because for the first time I could imagine something different, could imagine what it might feel like to be seen and loved for all of who I am, not just the acceptable parts." My own tears were flowing freely now. "I see you," I whispered. "I see all of you, Marcus, and what I see is beautiful." He let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "I thanked God for you at that table because it's true, because even though I'm terrified and confused and don't know how to reconcile my faith with my heart, I believe you were brought into my life for a reason. I believe this feeling, this connection, is sacred, even if it doesn't look like what I was taught sacred should look like." I reached for his hand then, threading my fingers through his. He gripped back desperately, like I was anchoring him to something solid. "I moved here to run away," I said, "to hide from life, from connection, from the possibility of being hurt again. But you've made me want to stop running. You've made me want to be brave." "I don't know what brave looks like here," Marcus said. "This town, my job, my family, it's all so complicated. I can't just come out and expect everything to be okay. There are real consequences." "I know," I said. "I'm not asking you to have all the answers. I'm just asking if you're willing to figure it out together, to take it one day at a time and see where this leads." He looked at our joined hands, then back at my face. "I want to kiss you," he said, his voice raw with longing. "I've wanted to since the first day I met you, but I'm scared." "Me too," I admitted. "But maybe that's okay. Maybe being scared means it matters." He leaned in slowly, giving me every opportunity to pull away. But I didn't. I met him halfway, and when our lips touched, it felt like coming home. Like every lonely night, every careful word, every moment of hiding had led to this. The kiss was gentle, tentative, full of wonder and relief and the shaky joy of finally being honest. When we pulled apart, Marcus was smiling through his tears. "I've never done that before," he said. "Kissed a man, been kissed by someone who knows all of me." "How did it feel?" I asked. "Like grace," he whispered, "like answered prayer." We sat there for a long time, holding hands, talking about the future in careful, hopeful terms. He told me about his fears, about the students who depended on him, about his mother who he knew, suspected but had never asked. I told him about my own journey, about the years of shame and hiding, about the hard-won peace I'd found with myself. We didn't solve anything that night, didn't make grand plans or promises we couldn't keep. But we chose each other. We chose honesty. We chose to believe that love, real love, was worth the risk. Over the following weeks, we navigated our relationship with careful deliberation. We were discreet but not dishonest. We found spaces where we could be ourselves. Drives to nearby cities, quiet evenings at my apartment, early morning hikes where the only witnesses were trees and sky. Marcus began working through his faith in new ways, finding theologians and writers who reconciled Christianity with queer identity. He started attending a small, affirming church in a neighboring town where he could explore what it meant to be both gay and faithful. It was painful work, unlearning years of internalized shame, but he approached it with the same gentleness he brought to everything. I watched him bloom, watched him grow lighter, more present, more fully himself. And in loving him, I found my own healing. Found that the love I'd been searching for in all those Chicago bars had been waiting here in this small Tennessee town, in the heart of a man brave enough to thank God for bringing me into his life. On Christmas Eve, Marcus invited me to his mother's house again. This time it was just the three of us. After dinner, as we sat in the living room with the tree lights glowing, Diane looked at both of us with those knowing eyes. "I want you boys to know something," she said, her voice steady and warm. "I see you. I see how you look at each other, how you care for each other, and I want you to know that love is love, that any love that makes you kinder, braver, more fully yourself is a gift from God." Marcus's breath caught. "Mama," he started, but she held up her hand. "Your father would have struggled with this. I won't lie about that. He was a man of his time, bound by interpretations that felt like concrete truth. But he also taught that God is love, and I choose to believe that fully. I choose to believe that my son's happiness, my son's wholeness, matters more than other people's comfort." She reached for both our hands. "You're welcome in this house, together, always. You're family, and family means showing up for each other exactly as we are." Marcus was crying openly now, and so was I. This gift, this acceptance, this grace, it was more than either of us had dared to hope for. That night, as Marcus and I sat in my apartment, the town quiet around us, he pulled me close and whispered, "I was wrong about something. I thought faithfulness meant denying myself. But maybe faithfulness means honoring the person God created me to be. Maybe it means having the courage to love fully, honestly, without shame." "And what does that look like?" I asked. "It looks like you and me, building a life together, slowly, carefully, but together. It looks like me being honest with my students about who I am so they know they're not alone. It looks like showing this town that love doesn't have to look one way to be valid." "That's brave," I said. "I learned it from you," he replied. "You came here running, but you taught me how to stand still, how to face what's real instead of what's safe." 6 months later, we're still navigating what it means to be two men in love in Millbrook, Tennessee. It's not always easy. There are whispered comments, careful distances, moments when the weight of other people's judgment feels crushing, but there are also moments of profound beauty. Students who come to Marcus for guidance, finding courage in his example. Neighbors who surprise us with acceptance. a community garden where we still work side by side every Saturday, growing things together. Last week, Marcus asked me to move in with him. Not hiding, not pretending to be roommates, but actually living together as partners. It's a risk in this town, but it's one he's ready to take. One we're ready to take together. As I write this, I'm sitting on our porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Marcus is inside, grading papers and humming to himself. And I'm thinking about that Thanksgiving prayer, about how one moment of courage can change everything, because he thanked God for bringing me to town. And in doing so, he taught me that faith and love don't have to be enemies. That being true to yourself is the most sacred act of all. That grace isn't just something we receive, but something we create through the courage to be seen, to be honest, to be fully, beautifully, messily human. I never believed in divine intervention, but I believe in Marcus. I believe in the love we're building, one brave choice at a time. And I believe that somewhere in the mystery of how we find each other, there's something worth calling holy.